Welcome to True Echo, where real voices, hard truths, and powerful stories rise above the noise. Today's story is one of injustice at 35,000 feet, and the unforgettable reckoning that followed. A young black woman was publicly humiliated in first class. Moments later, the entire flight would learn her true identity, and witness a transformation no one could have predicted. This isn't just a story. It's a statement. And once you hear it, you'll never forget her name, Amara Morgan. The soft hum of jet engines formed the background music to an elite world few were born into. Flight RS-472 from Los Angeles to New York had just begun boarding, and first class shimmered with excess. Champagne flutes clinked, neck pillows were fluffed, and the jazz soundtrack whispered affluence in every note. For the passengers, tech moguls, celebrities, old money elites, the space was more than a seat. It was a status symbol. When Amara Morgan stepped onto the aircraft, she didn't expect a red carpet. But she didn't expect suspicion either. Dressed in a navy blue blazer and heels, Amara exuded elegance and quiet command. Yet the moment she entered first class, a frost settled over the cabin. Chief Flight Attendant Lauren Briggs, blonde, polished, and commanding, locked eyes on her with that tight, polite smile used for problem passengers. "Excuse me," Lauren began. "I hope you're not in the wrong cabin, ma'am." The tone wasn't concerned. It was rehearsed, as if she'd said it before, to others who didn't look the part. Amara, calm and composed, held up her phone. "Seat 2A. Amara Morgan." Lauren didn't glance at the ticket. Her eyes flicked from Amara's skin to her unbranded clothes, as if searching for something out of place. "This section is for our priority guests," she said, voice colder now. "If you've been upgraded by mistake, I'll help you find your assigned seat." Amara didn't waver. "I believe I'm right where I belong." Around her, the silence of first class thickened. Passengers stole glances. Some smirked. Others stared into their devices, pretending not to hear. No one intervened. This wasn't Amara's first experience with subtle racism, but it was the first time it came wrapped in luxury linen and fake smiles. And this time, she wouldn't let it pass. As the jet's cabin door sealed shut, Lauren Briggs escalated. With every dismissive sentence, she chipped away at dignity she hadn't earned and didn't understand. "I know every face in this section," Lauren hissed quietly. "And yours isn't one of them." The performance was deliberate, public enough to intimidate, private enough to maintain plausible deniability. But Amara's silence wasn't surrender. It was calculation. Daniel Green, a corporate consultant sitting 2 rows back, watched with unease. He wasn't the type to get involved. But something about the way Lauren moved, the control, the intent, felt familiar. It reminded him of the boardrooms where bullies wore suits and cloaked power in courtesy. Amara stayed seated. Lauren, however, crossed the line. "If you don't leave, I will call security before we take off." At that moment, Amara did something unexpected. She leaned back, adjusted her blazer, and softly replied, "Do what you must." Lauren turned away, face flushed. And the cabin, which had enjoyed its high society hush, now buzzed with nervous energy. Then came the glass of water. Amara requested it politely. Lauren returned 20 minutes later with a tray, tilted just enough to spill ice water across Amara's cream trousers. Gasps echoed. Yet Lauren's voice rose, falsely sweet and accusing. "You put your foot in the aisle. So careless." But no one was fooled. Not this time. Not even the ones who stayed silent. And Amara, soaked but dignified, spoke the words that would ripple far beyond Flight RS-472. "You did that on purpose. And you've just made the biggest mistake of your life." The cabin of Flight RS-472, once cloaked in luxury and indifference, now pulsed with an invisible tension. Amara Morgan's words, "You've just made the biggest mistake of your life," hung in the air like static before a storm. Faces turned. Phones discreetly tilted into record mode. Eyes that had once looked through her now couldn't look away. Lauren Briggs didn't retreat. Instead, she hardened, the corners of her mouth twitching in defiance. But her movements were sharp now, panicked beneath the surface. Somewhere deep within, she sensed that something had shifted, that whatever invisible armor her uniform once offered was cracking. Still, she couldn't stop herself. Lauren bent, tray in hand, and in a moment that would echo far beyond that aircraft, she slapped Amara across the face. The sound tore through the cabin. A collective breath caught in every throat. Amara didn't flinch. She didn't raise her hand. She didn't retaliate. She simply sat, spine straight, chin high, eyes locked with Lauren's. Her cheek was bright red, a stinging mark left by the arrogance of unchecked power. Gasps. The thud of dropped glasses. The soft shuffle of a shocked cabin crew member stepping back. And then, silence. The kind that demands justice. From row 3B, Daniel Green stood so quickly his seat rocked. You just assaulted a passenger. In front of dozens of witnesses. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the luxury like a blade. Do you realize the legal consequences of what you've done? Lauren's face paled. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. Her gaze darted to the other passengers, seeking support from the same people she had once effortlessly charmed. None came. Instead, a voice trembled from the rear. Her name is at the top of the manifest, said Grace Holloway, the young assistant flight attendant. Her hands shook as she held the printed list. Amara Morgan. First class. Priority executive clearance. Lauren turned slowly, her eyes wide with disbelief. Because now the pieces were clicking into place, for everyone. The quiet woman she humiliated. The calm voice she ignored. The figure she physically struck. Was Amara Morgan, the billionaire CEO of Right Skies Airlines, owner of the very aircraft she tried to eject her from. Amara stood slowly. Every movement was intentional, measured. She pulled out her phone, tapped a short command, and sent a message through the airline's internal emergency management system. CEO on board. Immediate incident protocol. Violation, assault by crew. Flight RS-472. No exclamation marks. No panic. Just precision. At that moment, the intercom crackled to life. This is Captain Wellington. Due to an incident reported by senior corporate management, we are making an emergency landing at Hollow Creek Private Airport. All passengers remain seated. Crew, initiate Level 1 protocol. It was unheard of. No one diverted mid-flight unless there was a threat to life or national security. But this was something greater. It was a threat to the values the airline claimed to stand for. Lauren tried to speak. I didn't know who you were. I was just protecting standards. Amara didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. If I weren't the CEO, she said quietly, would you have treated me with any more decency? Because if your professionalism depends on identity, you were never fit to serve anyone. The weight of her words hit harder than any slap. All around her, heads began to nod. Megan Sinclair, who had whispered disdain just minutes earlier, looked away, cheeks flushed with shame. Daniel Green gave a curt nod of affirmation. And Grace Holloway stood straighter. I hereby terminate your employment, Amara declared, turning to Lauren. Effective immediately, for gross misconduct and violation of federal ethics regulations. The cabin exhaled. It wasn't just justice, it was justice from within. Unfolding not through anger, but through truth. Captain Wellington stepped into the aisle moments later. With solemn formality, he unclipped Lauren's badge from her blazer. You are no longer permitted to serve on any Right Skies Airlines flight. Ever. Lauren crumbled into her seat, hands shaking, tears threatening to spill, not from remorse, but from the crumbling of a fortress she thought would protect her forever. The first-class cabin was no longer a silent audience. It had become a courtroom. And the verdict was delivered, not just by authority, but by dignity. Outside the window, the lights of Hollow Creek Airport twinkled into view, a strip of runway cutting across the darkening landscape like a new beginning. But for Amara Morgan, this was not just about justice for one. It was about reclaiming the sky, for everyone who had ever been told they didn't belong in the front row. The wheels touched down at Hollow Creek Private Airport with a soft screech, but inside Flight RS-472, the atmosphere remained taut with unresolved shock. The soft click of seat belts unfastening was followed by the silence of held breaths. It wasn't turbulence that had rocked this cabin, it was truth. The cabin door opened to reveal two federal agents, their dark uniforms crisp, silver badges catching the light. They stepped aboard with the kind of quiet authority that silences even the boldest passenger. Their eyes scanned the cabin, then locked on Amara Morgan. "Miss Morgan," the senior officer said solemnly, "we've received a report of serious misconduct aboard this flight. Would you like to file an official complaint?" The room seemed to freeze. Amara rose, her posture poised, her voice clear and firm. "Yes," she said. "I'm a black woman who was slapped and publicly humiliated in front of dozens of witnesses, on my own aircraft." The reaction was immediate. A ripple of recognition crossed every face in the cabin. What had started as a moment of silence now thundered inside every passenger's conscience. Some sat back, stunned. Others looked down, ashamed they hadn't spoken sooner. From across the aisle, Megan Sinclair, who had once whispered scorn, now stared at her shoes. Daniel Green, still standing in quiet solidarity, offered Amara a subtle, respectful nod. Even Richard Thompson, the billionaire who had been greeted with champagne earlier, looked at Amara not as an interloper but as an equal. A rightful owner. The agent turned toward Lauren Briggs. "Ms. Briggs," he said flatly, "you are under arrest for assault, violation of passenger dignity, and discrimination under the Federal Aviation Act." The cabin held its breath. With trembling hands, Lauren tried to speak. "This is a misunderstanding, I didn't mean." Click. The handcuffs closed around her wrists. Cold, metallic, and final. Passengers who once applauded Lauren's efficiency now watched her walk the aisle in shackles. No one clapped. No one looked away. Because there are moments when the truth is so naked, so overwhelming, it demands to be seen, even if it makes you squirm. Grace Holloway, still gripping the manifest, wiped a tear from her cheek. Amara stepped toward her. "You spoke the truth," she said softly. "Even when it cost you everything." Grace didn't respond with words. She just nodded, her expression a mix of relief and awe. The cabin door closed again. The aircraft remained grounded for protocol checks, but inside, something far greater had shifted. Passengers rose one by one, approaching Amara, not with apologies, but with respect. One young woman, barely 20, whispered, "You made me feel seen." A mother with a mixed-race son gripped Amara's hand and murmured, "Now I know I can fly with my son in peace." But Amara wasn't basking in praise. She was thinking, of all the unrecorded moments, the silent humiliations so many had faced without cameras, without titles, without protection. This incident wasn't unique. It was common, only this time, someone had the power and the will to expose it. Later that evening, videos of the flight began circulating online. The slap. The stare. The arrest. And above all, Amara's quiet strength. #RespectIsAirright began trending globally within hours. Celebrities, politicians, and activists shared the story. Not for its scandal, but for its symbolism. News anchors ran endless loops of the scene. Analysts debated it. But the people, the ones who truly understood injustice, felt it. By morning, Amara Morgan's story wasn't just viral. It was a movement. Right Skies Airlines issued an official statement, but Amara refused to let it end there. In a live-streamed press conference, she stood on a stage, dressed in the same blazer she'd worn on the flight, still bearing faint traces of the spilled water on the hem. No one, she began, should ever have to prove they deserve respect. Applause. But Amara wasn't here to be celebrated. She was here to set standards. From this moment on, she declared, Bright Skies Airlines will lead the industry in zero-tolerance policies for discrimination of any kind. Not in theory. In action. She announced. Mandatory bias and ethics retraining for all staff. A 24/7 dignity hotline for passengers and crew. Transparent ethics performance reports for all team members. Public accountability for every verified complaint. She didn't speak in PR jargon. She spoke like someone who'd sat in the fire, and built the ladder out of it. As Amara stepped off the stage, reporters shouted her name. Cameras flashed. But what stayed in every viewer's mind wasn't the spectacle. It was the quote they'd replay 1,000 times. Respect isn't a reward. It's a right. In the days that followed Amara Morgan's historic press conference, the world shifted, both online and in real life. Bright Skies Airlines transformed overnight. What had once been a company praised for luxury now stood as a beacon for justice. Amara didn't just polish the brand. She rewrote the entire rulebook. At corporate headquarters in Chicago, her team worked around the clock to roll out the new Dignity First initiative. It was more than a PR move. It was a full-scale revolution in how human beings were treated inside the aviation industry, and far beyond. Amara stood at the front of every executive meeting. Her voice calm. Her eyes sharp. Gone were the buzzwords. This was about systems, about people, and about erasing the quiet prejudice woven into the fabric of power. We will not just respond to injustice, she said firmly. We will prevent it, expose it, and rebuild from the ground up. And she meant it. By week 1, Bright Skies had implemented a required 8-week immersive ethics and anti-bias training course for every employee, from ground staff to flight deck. A fully transparent complaint dashboard, visible to the public, tracking every case of reported misconduct and resolution. A zero-tolerance clause, anyone found guilty of discrimination would be permanently barred from working across the Bright Skies network. No loopholes. No legacy protections. No, but they've been here 20 years. The message was simple, either evolve, or you're out. Other airlines scrambled to respond. Polaris Air, WestJet, and even international carriers followed suit, announcing rushed reform packages to avoid being left behind. But none could match the authenticity of what had happened at Bright Skies. Because only one airline's CEO had lived the injustice personally. Back on the ground, Amara was inundated with messages. Thousands of them. Some were from celebrities, business leaders, and politicians. But others hit harder, because they came from ordinary people with extraordinary wounds. A black father shared how his 10-year-old daughter cried when a hotel receptionist ignored her greeting. A flight attendant wrote, "I stood by while my colleague humiliated a passenger once. I still regret it. Your courage gave me the strength to never stay silent again." An elderly woman, white and from the South, sent a handwritten note, "I was raised to look away. Thank you for teaching me how to look in the mirror." And then came a letter Amara would never forget. It was from a young girl named Kalani. Just 11. "My teacher said I couldn't be a pilot 'cause I talk too loud. But now I want to fly planes and be brave like you. Will you write me back?" Amara did. She sent a handwritten reply, inviting Kalani to visit the Bright Skies Training Center anytime, with an open door. Because this, not the media frenzy, was the purpose. Opening doors no one even realized were closed. Meanwhile, the photograph of Amara Morgan and Grace Holloway standing side by side in the cabin had become iconic. It now hung in every Bright Skies terminal and employee break room under one powerful phrase. Those with the power to choose. Those with the conscience to drive change. Grace, once a nervous junior attendant, was now being mentored directly by Amara. She had been promoted to Senior Cabin Integrity Officer, a newly created role focused on passenger rights and ethical conduct. Your truth, Amara had told her privately, was louder than the entire cabin's silence. But not everyone welcomed the change. Some longtime executives resisted quietly, citing costs and culture shifts. Others warned Amara she was overcorrecting. That she'd draw too much attention. That enforcing dignity like this might scare away investors. To all of them, Amara gave the same response. If justice costs you comfort, it was never comfort. It was control. The board fell silent. Because they knew she wasn't bluffing. And she wasn't asking for permission. By the second week, every major media outlet had dubbed it the Amara effect. Morning shows, late-night hosts, and even high school debate teams discussed the ethical shift she triggered in corporate culture. Not by preaching, but by standing up. An NPR segment called her the Rosa Parks of the sky. She didn't correct them. But in a private moment, she told her assistant, Parks did it when her life was on the line. I just did it with a phone and a platform. She's the real hero. I'm just paying the debt forward. And perhaps most quietly, most powerfully, a ripple began to spread into other industries. Banks began re-evaluating customer service training. Tech companies added dignity metrics to performance reviews. Even high-end restaurants started retraining staff on unconscious bias and fair treatment. Amara's message, respect is a right, was no longer a slogan. It had become a global standard. And through it all, Amara remained composed. Not because the attention didn't touch her, but because the work wasn't done. She knew this was only the beginning. Because if change could start in one plane cabin, it could land anywhere. A month after the incident that reshaped the skies, Amara Morgan found herself once again boarding a Wright Skies flight. This time, it was not for confrontation, but for quiet reflection. She wore the same tailored navy suit, ironed, but still carrying the memory of spilled water. As she stepped into the cabin, a hush spread, not from discomfort, but from recognition. This wasn't fame. It was reverence. The new lead flight attendant, Julia Chen, greeted her at the threshold with a respectful nod. Welcome back, Miss Morgan. It's an honor to serve you today. And, thank you. For everything. The words weren't rehearsed. They came from the heart of someone who now worked in an airline where fairness wasn't a poster slogan, it was policy. The cabin had changed, subtly but unmistakably. There were no elite smirks. No covert glances sizing up outfits or skin tones. Just professionalism, warmth, and the quiet hum of people coexisting in peace. In the row ahead, a young black boy sat beside his mother, his nose pressed to the window. Amara caught his gaze as he turned back around, eyes wide. Are you the lady from the video? He asked quietly. His mother flushed. I told him to be respectful. But Amara smiled. Yes. I am. The boy grinned, then whispered, I wanna fly planes someday. Julia Chen overheard, and moments later, returned with a fresh glass of orange juice and a small cookie. This is for our future pilots, she said softly. The entire first-class cabin paused, not in offense, not in judgment, but in admiration. Because in that moment, everyone understood, this is what change looked like. Mid-flight, Daniel Green approached Amara. He was no longer the passive observer from that fateful day. Now, he carried himself differently, like someone who'd been altered by consequence. Miss Morgan, he said, extending a hand. You gave us all a lesson we didn't know we needed. I used to think luxury was about exclusivity. You made me realize it should have always been about respect. Amara shook his hand warmly. It's never too late to stand up, she replied. It just takes one moment of clarity. Daniel nodded, pausing. I want to invest. Not in a brand. In what you're building. Amara didn't respond with a sales pitch. She just smiled. "This isn't a product," she said. "It's a standard. You either live by it, or you stand in the way." As the flight touched down and passengers disembarked, each took with them more than their luggage. They carried a renewed understanding of service, status, and silence. But back at corporate headquarters, the real work continued. Amara convened her leadership team again, this time in a glass-walled boardroom bathed in morning sunlight. "We've addressed service," she began. "Now we tackle culture." She rolled out Phase 2 of the Dignity First program. 1. Promotion equity audits, a top-down review of all promotion and hiring trends across departments, ensuring no systemic barriers went unnoticed. 2. Ethics scorecards, every manager, regardless of department, would now be reviewed not only on performance metrics, but on how their teams felt working under them. These results would be visible to all staff. 3. Anonymous leadership challenges, a new initiative where employees could anonymously submit challenges, injustices, or discriminatory incidents involving any executive, with mandatory independent review. 4. Real-time inclusion dashboard, displayed in every break room, showing live feedback scores from passengers and staff alike regarding fairness and conduct. "This isn't about fear," Amara said, locking eyes with the older executives who still shifted in their seats. "It's about standards we can be proud of." She didn't speak with fire. She spoke with gravity. And that made it harder to dismiss. Media coverage of Right Sky's transformation went viral once more. But this time, the headlines weren't about a slap or a scandal. They were about leadership. Time magazine named Amara Morgan one of the most influential CEOs of the decade. Forbes called her the future of ethical capitalism. Harvard Business Review published a case study titled From Injustice to Institutional Change, the Right Skies Model. Yet Amara wasn't chasing accolades. Her focus was still on the quiet moments, the eyes of that little boy on the plane. The trembling voice of Grace Holloway. The thousand untold stories hiding in every check-in line, every gate, every first-class lounge. One day, Amara received a small package at her office. Inside was a note in a child's scrawl. "Dear Miss Morgan. I flew to Grandma's house yesterday. They treated us like kings. I wore my suit. I told everyone I want to fly like you. My mom smiled the whole flight. Thank you for making skies that are fair. Kalani." Below it was a picture, a crayon drawing of Amara standing next to an airplane, with a heart on the tail fin. Amara placed it in a frame on her desk. Because that's what this was always about. Not punishment. Not power. But hope. The morning sun poured through the glass walls of Right Sky's headquarters as Amara Morgan stood alone in the executive lounge, sipping tea and watching the runway below. Planes came and went, gliding like giants across the sky, each one a vessel not just for passengers, but now for purpose. It had been 3 months since Flight RS-472, 3 months since a slap shattered the silence of luxury, and 3 months since Amara transformed a private humiliation into a public reckoning. But Amara had never wanted to be a symbol. She wanted systems to change, not stories to trend. And yet, the world had changed. Across industries, from aviation to hospitality, retail to real estate, companies scrambled to replicate Right Sky's Dignity First blueprint. Training protocols were rewritten. Ethics departments gained real power. Complaint hotlines were unburied from policy manuals and placed front and center. But it was in the quiet spaces, the invisible moments, that Amara saw the real revolution. A white father helped a black mother with her toddler at a crowded gate. A flight attendant politely corrected a colleague misgendering a passenger. A pilot knelt beside an elderly woman struggling to walk, not to rush her, but to thank her for choosing their flight. None of it made headlines. But that's how dignity wins, not with noise, but with conscience. On the wall of Right Sky's HQ now hung a photograph that had become legend, Amara and Grace Holloway, standing in that infamous first-class cabin. One woman with power, the other with courage. Together, they had reshaped the meaning of service at 35,000 feet. Etched beneath the photo. Those with the power to choose. Those with the conscience to drive change. It wasn't just a slogan. It was a vow. Every employee passed it daily. Some with pride. Some with renewed purpose. A few with humility. But all understood, respect was no longer optional. Amara didn't disappear into boardrooms or speaking circuits. She traveled. She listened. She asked ground crews what made them feel seen. She met with first-year flight attendants. She hosted private town halls where every voice, from janitors to senior pilots, was heard. At one such session, a shy baggage handler named Jose spoke up. "I used to think we were invisible," he said. "But now, even the captains say, 'thank you,' to us." Amara smiled. "That's the altitude we aim for," she said. "Not miles in the sky. But inches in the heart." The media never stopped calling her a trailblazer. But Amara saw herself as a mirror, one that forced people to see what they'd ignored. Disrespect disguised as protocol. Prejudice hidden behind policy. Silence mistaken for neutrality. She exposed it, not by screaming, but by standing up. Alone at first. But never again. 6 months after RS-472, Amara boarded a new Right Skies flight. The plane was full, diverse, vibrant, humming with energy. At the gate, a middle-aged white man in a crisp suit approached her. "You're Amara, right?" he asked gently. She nodded. "My daughter's Latina. She got promoted last week because her manager said your reforms changed how they review leadership. Just wanted to say thanks." Amara shook his hand. "Thank her for sticking through a world that wasn't built for her." He nodded. "It is now." As the plane took off, Amara gazed out the window, watching the clouds part like curtains on a new stage. She pulled out her phone and began typing a message to her little sister, now a freshman in college. "Remember when you asked? Aren't you ever afraid to stand up all alone? I was. But you don't have to shout to be heard. You just have to stand. And sometimes, when you do, the whole sky listens." And that is the story of Amara Morgan. A woman who was silenced, then stood. A CEO who was slapped, then soared. Not by seeking revenge. Not by flexing her title. But by showing the world that dignity is not a privilege, it's a promise. And when we choose to uphold it, we don't just change a policy. We change what it means to belong. What happened on Flight RS-472 wasn't just a moment of injustice, it was a moment of awakening. Amara Morgan reminded us that power means nothing without principle, and silence can be more dangerous than action. As Amara once said, "Respect isn't a reward. It's a right." Let that be the standard, not just in the skies, but everywhere. If this story moved you, if it inspired you to rethink silence, speak out, or simply act with more humanity, subscribe to True Echo for more powerful stories that matter. Leave a comment below. And share this story with someone who needs the courage to stand, because sometimes, one voice really is all it takes.